Hi, I'm Cheryl Casper, and this is Opal Ernest. And this is a very, very quick and dirty example of how to cut an opal, a common opal that I just simply want to show you the process of cutting. I'm going to skip some steps, and I'll tell you when I do. But the idea for this, there are a couple people who just really want to look at an example of cutting, and so I'm going to try not to spend a lot of time editing this video or adding call-outs or whatever. So I'm just going to show you, hopefully, without turning the camera off. So let's get started. This is the stone I've chosen to cut. It's just a piece of potch from Lightning Ridge, and I'm just going to use it. It doesn't have any color play, but I just want to show you how to cut an opal and how it's a little bit different than other stones you might cabochon. I'm going to analyze the stone, begin by analyzing the stone under a light. I'm going to look at it from the edge of the light. I'm going to look at it an inch down and an inch forward so that I get some backlight on it. And I'm looking for things like cracks. I've got a little crack in there right here. So that's what you're doing to analyze the stone before you even start. So now that I have analyzed my stone, and there's a lot more to that, guys. I'm just trying to rush you through the process here. I am going to use my pixie. This is my pixie. It's obviously even dirty, but it goes from 2 metal wheels, which are called Galaxy wheels, and they are 80, 220, and then my Nova wheels, which are rubber padded. You can see the rubber padding in there. And it's a 280, a 600, a 1200, and a 14,000 here at the end, which is changeable. You could also get on your pixie, it comes shipped with a 3,000, but we like to change them out sometimes for 14,000. And then at the very end down here, you could see at the end of this 14,000, there's a little hole where you could plug in a little disc or a buff or something like that on the end, and we can do that if we want to. So I'm going to start by getting my stone ready to dop. So I'm going to add some water to my tray. Some water. Obviously, you should keep your pixie cleaner than this, but I'm using my workhorse, and I'm really trying to get this video out quickly because I've just started a new job. Yay, Cheryl. And I don't have time to edit a lot of video. Anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to go over to where I don't want to put my spitter in yet into the water, but I want my water to be, between 1/2 and 3/4 the way up on my spitter, simply because it works best about that way, like this. But if you leave the geyser or the spitter, informally called, in the water can go up the hose and back into the pump, and then you'll have to really clean that out. So every time you've got your pixie turned off, you want to take that out and put it on a dry surface over here on the side. So I'm going to start by going around the edge of my stone, and cleaning this up a little bit so I can start getting a girdle established. Yes, there are many more steps here in analyzing this and so forth, but again, a quick and dirty method just to show you the process that we've got to cut, okay? Okay, I'm going to start all the way down here at the end, almost not at the 80 because that's kind of too coarse, but right here on the Galaxy, the metal 220. So my machine's loud, but I'll be right back, I promise. So we've established sort of a girdle here. You may certainly use a template in order to get it to the exact diameters that you want there, or you can simply leave it so that you can discover what's in the stone and cut based on your discoveries, which is probably a better way to do it, because you don't know if it's got precious opal in it, if the precious opal is going to be, buried down in there or what. So before we go any further, we've gotten the base flattened a little bit so that we can put a dop on there. And I probably would try to do a little bit better job than that, but just to be quick here, we want to put a little bevel around the edge on the side down here so that this is not as likely to chip as we work. And we need to do it before we put the dop stick on, because otherwise it'll be more difficult to get it on there. So let's put that bevel on there really quickly. So we put the stone against the wheel at about a 45-degree angle, like this. You can see that little bevel right here, where that little flat angle, where we've taken the edge off of the stone by putting the stone against the wheel at a 45-degree angle and then rotating it around so that it just knocks that edge off. And yes, you need to be careful with your knuckles here. You saw that my knuckles were really close, so you want to be careful and take care of your hands as well. Remember to take the spitter out, the geyser out of the machine before you turn it off so that the water doesn't go up the tube and into the pump. So now that we've got that out of the way, we're ready to dop. So I'll meet you at my dopping station. Okay, here is my makeshift dopping station. Here's my stone. That's my bottom. I've got my bevel along the edge, and that's my top. I want to draw a line around my girdle of my stone, putting the base down on my flat surface. So now I've got my stone and I've got my bevel on the back of it and a flat base. And I'm going to mark a line on my girdle where I want my girdle to go. And usually the height of a pencil, like this height right here, if you put it flat, is about 3 millimeters. You don't want, if you use a caliper, you don't want the stone to be less than 2 millimeters from in the narrowest point, because it's too fragile and it'll chip off. So you want to be careful about that. So I'm drawing a line for myself on the side of this stone, all the way around the stone, keeping the pencil firmly in place so that it doesn't move. I'm moving the stone instead. Move the stone and just let it pivot on around. I'm really close on that area. And you'll find that you have uneven heights and so forth. But this is about 3 millimeters, so I've got a little wiggle room if I cut to this line. So now that I've got that line clearly marked all the way around that stone, and you can see the pencil line right there shining, that's what I'm going to cut to, is that line right there. Now, I'm going to dop my stone. So I'm going to come back out a little bit. So this is my makeshift dopping station. I've got accelerant, NCF Quick accelerant for instant glues. It's made by Satellite City, and we get it where we get the other glue. We use the thick green glue. It's called Special T, and it fills gaps and so forth. You can use a lot of different glues and so forth, but we prefer glue instead of like a dopping wax because it holds the stone well. We use wooden dops, and we cut it off with a saw instead of trying to use some method like heat, which might damage the stone. Now, you might not have any problem with it, or you might. there are people in both camps. I need to make sure that my stone is dry, which it is not right now. So that is a good use for my jeans. But I do need to make sure it's really, really dry, or else it'll affect the way that the glue adheres. So now it's dry. I'm going to choose one of my dop sticks that fits my stone the best. And I think that this is a pretty good fit. If I go too big on it, it'll go over the edges and it'll affect the way that I cut. I need to make sure that it's flat on the bottom, and this one is. Some of them aren't, and they kind of go wonky. They get on your dop, you know, kind of like that, and you don't want that. So it's best to have some sort of an abrasion to get the stick a little more teeth. We can just kind of rough it up a little there. You could certainly use an emery board or something to rough that up a little bit, but it just helps the glue adhere a little bit to the dop stick. Okay, good. Now this dop stick is ready to be put onto this stone. So again, I don't want it to let it get wet, so I'm going to put it over here where it's dry. And I'm going to, from my glue bottle, now I will often cheat and actually dip my dop stick down into the glue, but that is cheating. And it's bad because it gets glue all around the surface up here. So if you're at William Holland or some other place where you're trying to be considerate of others, you don't want to get any glue around there because it really cruds the thing up. So I'm gonna take my dry toothpick, and I don't even want to turn the glue really, and I want to let it come straight out. You can see how thick that is. The red glue is much, much thinner, but I feel like I waste a little bit by doing it this way, which is why I put the dop stick directly in the glue. But you need to do whatever your teacher tells you to do. So there's now some glue there. I've got my paper towel over here, and I'm wiping off that stick so that I won't lay it down and have it stick to the surface that I'm working with. And I want to work quickly here, but I'm also trying to show you I want for my dop stick, and I'm going to hold my dop stick flat on my stone. You can see how it kind of puddles up a little bit right there. Make sure you get it in the middle of the stone, or else you'll be cut into the sideways stone. You want to get it really straight, okay? Really straight on there. It looks a little off in the video, but it is actually straight on there. And now I'm going to take my accelerant that I've got and put it really, actually really close to the surface. See if I can get this right instead of want it to be really close to that surface. But I don't want to be in the way so you can't see it. So that it's actually very, very close. So that you use less spray and more of it gets onto the stone right there. And if you can do that, you'll start to see it crystallizing a little bit. And I'm going to move this forward, which you should not do, because once you move it around, you start to break the seal that's actually forming in this location. But you can start to see a little bit of crystallization occurring here. This is not a drying agent. It is a hardening agent. So it creates a molecular change even underneath the dop stick and in there. So that's what that spray really helps to do. It can irritate your lungs. So be very, very careful. I'm going to put another little spray right there. I don't need to, but I just want you to see how it is. Okay. It's quick. It's a quick little spray. And it really does smell bad. But I'm going to wait for 2 minutes, and then this stone is ready to cut. Okay? So I'll meet you here in 2 minutes. Hi. So this is our stone, and it's dopped, and it's ready to go. But I wanted to talk about this line for a second. Some people, when they learn how to cabochon, they don't they don't draw a line, and that's perfectly fine. There's a lot of different ways to do this, and so you should just be aware of whatever way is right for you or that your teacher is teaching you. But the reason I do this for Opal is because eventually people are going to go to Precious Opal, and they'll probably start with straight color bars right along here. And I want you, as we work through this, I want you to think about this stone having a color bar, and this is the color bar. And so we're working towards cutting towards the color bar. So again, many ways to do this, but I'm going to show you a method of what I call peeling the apple. And that's, there are many ways to do this. Again, I have a friend, Sarah Lee Boyce, who teaches a 14-step method of doing a stroking, and it's really, really good for getting a good dome. And there's a lot of ways to do this. There's no right way or wrong way. It's just a different way of thinking about how you approach it. But what I'm going to do when I peel this apple is I'm going to come in on my pixie, and I'm going to go, can you see where I painted the silver line right there? I did that on top of the pencil marking so that you could see it a little easier. Right there, you see that silver shining on there? So that's just kind of paint, silver paint that I put on there to help us see that line a little clearer. But I'm going to go above that line at a 45-degree angle, like this, with my wheel. And I'm going to go all the way around that, like I'm peeling an apple with a peeler. 45-degree angle all the way around. Okay? So that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to show you what that's going to look like. Good. So that's what we're going to try to achieve with this stone that we've got on our dop stick, is to cut this area above the line into a 45-degree angle right there so that we can establish a girdle. So we're going to try to do that right now, and I'm going to try to show you here, and here's the noise of the machine. Now that we've got that 45-degree angle all the way around our girdle, all the way down to the girdle line that we drew, that silver paint that we see there, we're going to blend the top and smooth it. But if that had a color bar in there, we would be down just touching that color bar. That's another class, but I want to teach you at this point just how to round it and keep going. So you saw that when I started, I had my stick at a 45-degree angle from the wheel. And it's kind of hard to demonstrate that, but you're showing this angle here. So I've got a 45-degree angle, and I'm going to work from a 45-degree angle there to a 45-degree angle here, and I'm going to smooth everywhere in between in a rolling action, and I just don't want to get any more of that silver line. So as long as I'm making a dome on the top of that silver line, either by stroking or by twirling, however you choose to do that, you're creating as much of a blend on the top as you can. Okay, let's do that. Now, we've finished blending that, and the main thing is that you can still see that silver line all the way around that girdle. And in looking at that silver line, you noticed I was pointing out that because the stone is longer on the ends than it is in the center from side to side, that we will have a tendency as we turn that stone on that wheel to overcut the end here and here, the far end. And that holds true for a triangle, an oblong like this, a marquee, any shape that we've got that has elongated ends to it, we will tend to overcut here and here, which is one reason why it's so important to keep an eye on that silver line. You can see I've even gotten really close to cutting that off right in there. So, but our goal was to create a blend here, a blended area there, where we could then move on up to the next wheel, our Nova wheels. And when we press in on our Nova wheels, you can see they're kind of padded. And so that will help us to create a smoother blended dome on the top of this stone right here. But I'm still keeping my eye on that girdle line because I don't want it to get any lower than that, or I'm going to end up with a stone that's too brittle or too fragile on either side. It's too thin because it's going to be less than our 2 millimeter mark. So we have to be very careful about that. Okay, so now we're going to go on and go to our Nova wheel. So you can tell I'm starting to get a little wear on this wheel, and I need to fix that.
Notice as I'm working on this wheel, because it's padded, I can press into this wheel a little bit with this stone. Certainly not so much that it causes a dry spot or that it cuts into the, or damages the wheel itself, but I can press in just enough as I turn. You can see the yield that has, and it's creating, instead of a flat that meets my stone, it's creating a curve that meets my stone, which is creating a more blended look to that stone. So I've wiped it off with my towel after every single step, right? And so I've got a fairly decent shape on that stone. You can tell that I've got a little bit too much taken off over here, which I should probably clean up. And but I still have my 2 millimeters. I still have my 2 millimeters all the way around, except for maybe in that little area right there where I got a little too low on there. So I would probably lose about that much of that stone as I went in and took that off. If you were using a template, you could go back in and check your size to the template and make sure that your size is what you want it to be. Okay, so I want to shape up some of this stone right here because it's not totally oval. So I'm going to go back to my 280 wheel. So I'm going to work to getting a rounder shape and to taking off a little bit of this flat spot over here where I got too deep. So I'm going to do that right here. So here's my finished sewn. So I'd like for us to talk for just a second about the anatomy of this cabochon, just so that you can have a common way to talk about things. Just to repeat, this is the girdle. This is the edge of the girdle and the top of the cabochon, or the dome. This should not be sharp. It can be precise, but it shouldn't be sharp. So make sure you clean that up all the way around. This is the top, and if it had a flat spot in here, it would be hard to get the scratches out of that flat spot. So even though this is a pretty shallow dome, it is a dome indeed, and it does not have a little flat right there in the middle. And that would be somewhere right about here that we'd have a little flat spot, and we don't have that, so we're in good shape. Now, if I were going to get scratches, or if I were analyzing my students' stones, what I would commonly find is that they would have scratches right along here. That's a common space for people to have problems, is right along in here, you know, or even down in here. And sometimes your girdles do as well, but it's more important to make sure that you roll that stone in that space. So if you've got your stone here, it's important to remember to get that edge right there as you go around each time, and then work your, see the angle of my dop stick? To work your way from there, moving your dop stick towards flat on. Now you don't want to cut it flat on, but that's going to help you as you roll to keep your eye on that angle. And then flat. So that you can keep working that whole area of the dome, and it'll help you get a smoother dome. So the last thing that we need to do to this stone is polish it. It's already gone through the 14,000, and we are ready. If we saw any scratches at this point, we would go back and try to clean them up. We might have to go back to the 1200. If they're deep, we might even have to go back to the 600. And that's why it's so important to keep your machine clean, not like this, but really clean. And if you have scratches, you need to come in with your agate and clean it. In order to remove any debris or something that may be on there, creating scratches on your stone. So that's to use an agate across there, to use an eraser, to use a brush. Anything like that might help get that off. But keep your eye on the scratches. If you notice a directionality in your scratches, then they're coming from a particular place where something is contaminated, or you're not twirling your stone well enough and moving it across the wheel enough from side to side. Remember to use the whole wheel, because it has a tendency to wear out here in the middle. You know how I know? See? It does, I promise you. Okay, now we go to Zam to polish. So in my newly set up lapidary, I still have a lot of organizing to do, as is obvious, but I have set up here my wheel that's got Zam on it. And Zam is a product that it's a buffing compound, and it's about a 25,000 polish grit. And so it makes a nice polish. Some people use it as the final polish. Some people will use it as a prep before 50,000 or 100,000. It depends on what your preferences are. And this is already coated, but if it weren't, I would take my Zam and I would turn the machine on and just add a little to it. It doesn't take very much. But I've got it set up here on a muslin buff, and we're going to take a look at what that looks like to buff it up. Okay. And be careful not to let it get too hot. You're always going to have to use the cheek test. So you'll see me do that. Once I pull it off of here, I'll put it to my cheek. Because if it's too hot for my cheek, it's too hot for the stone. Okay? Okay. So this goes really fast, so be careful of it getting too hot, okay? I'm going to address the girdle first, the edge, and the top. Twirl, twirl, twirl. Test it on my cheek. Twirl, twirl, twirl. Look at it. Okay? So here's my finished stone. Now, if I look at this really closely, I can see that it's not very well polished, and that's because I kind of rushed this process. So as I was going through the wheels, I need to take the time to make sure on each step that this is
is well polished. I don't see any major scratches. It's just that I kind of went too fast. So, but that's how to do the process. So I'm going to go over to my saw now, and I'm going to cut off the stop stick as close to the stone as I can get it, and still be careful. So very close to that without touching the stone. So here's my stone, my finished stone,
And I'm going to grind off that little bit of glue and the dop stick that's on the back of it. So let's take a look at that. Okay.
So your stone is finished now. And you can use a wax polish on it if you want additional shine. And the primary goal of the polish is to be able to read the name of the light bulb in the reflection of the stone. So this is not there yet, but I will keep working on that. But that, in a nutshell, is the process for cutting a stone. So that's not cutting to color, but that's to get you prepped to be able to create a cabochon, in essence, that is thick enough on the sides that will not crack when you try to set it into a setting. So hopefully, because 9 times out of 10, if it's going to crack while you're setting it with too much pressure on it. So that's why we do that. And so hopefully I'll get you a new video of this process that's a lot cleaner and takes more time with it. But that, in a nutshell, is it. Okay? So let me know how you're doing. I want to know how you're doing.